Well, hello and welcome back to the One Soccer Hangout. Pleased to be joined by our analysts Oliver Platt and Gareth Wheeler, and special guests today as the CPL coaching carousel continues. It is two-time defending CPL champion, the technical director and head coach of Forge FC, Bobby Smyrniotis, and he brought the beard to the Hangout. I was so worried that we were going to log on and see clean-shaven Bobby, and I was not mentally prepared, so I'm relieved, and I think this show is going to go exceptionally well. Bobby, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Beard's here to stay.
That is huge. Look at the colors in that too. It's ombre.
It's getting there. Like I said, it's the boys' decision back home, and the boys say the beard stays, so it stays.
You're like the modern day ZZ Top. Look at you.
There we go.
Ollie, you feeling left out at all today? Are we convincing you at all to try and grow out the facial hair? I'd love to see that experiment.
He has to be able to grow facial hair, Adam. That's the problem.
Ollie had 6 weeks at PEI, right? So that was his opportunity.
Yeah.
Did you shave
I can
once
grow
at
it.
PEI?
Me?
Yeah.
Clearly, yeah. No, I can grow facial hair. It just doesn't look good. It would be the end of my days on One Soccer. I can tell you that if I let it grow out. So I'm keeping it clean shaven.
Yeah, right. That sounds like an excuse from a man who cannot grow facial hair. I don't believe it.
No, I'm a regular shaver.
So if Ollie ever wants to go back to just being an analyst and writer off camera, he can just grow the beard out and we have a perfect, there's your get out of jail or get into jail free card. All right, gentlemen, we'll try and park the facial hair conversation for now. And Bobby, we will get into your upcoming big week heading to El Salvador very shortly. But first, before we get there, want to reflect back on what has been obviously another very successful year for Forge FC. And it's starting to feel like the norm, Bobby, that's just the expectation for this club, from ownership down to the training staff, the players who don't even get the big minutes. The expectation is we're going to go and we're going to win this championship. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I think that's been the message from day one. That's what we wanted to be able to build here when we go back into the beginning of 2019, the end of 2018, when we start putting this project together. It's we want to build something that's going to have a culture that deals with winning, that deals with competitiveness, and always being prepared to find whatever competitive battles in front of us. And yeah, we've been blessed to be able to do it now 2 years in a row.
And obviously two-time defending champion. Ollie and Gareth, questions for you, and we'll get Bobby's take on this as well. What was the more impressive and more dominant team, or frame it this way, who would win in a game, 2020 Forge or 2019 Forge? Wheels, who gets your vote?
There's so many similar players. It's part of the success, right? Coming up with that 2-year plan or 3-year plan. Bobby can take you deeper into that. I'm not sure which team would be better. It's a tough question, but I'll side with the team that had Tristan Borges on it, just because he just brought that X factor. We all know his credentials and what he meant to that group. And I think that the team played a little bit different this year, was a little bit more mature over the course of playing tournament football, but playing and enduring a full season with spring and fall seasons involved, and then going through a two-legged final is a little bit different than, playing 11 games over the course of a month. So I'll go with the team that actually went the distance and played a real season, if you would, rather than the tournament football. So I'll go the 2019 version.
Ollie?
I'm going to disagree. I'll take this year's team. I think obviously Borges was a special player in the league, and you do lose that bit of individual quality, although there have been some players that have stepped up there. But I just think the team's a bit older and wiser and more experienced this year. And I thought, the way the league as a whole got better, Pacific got better, Halifax got a lot better. And Forge was still essentially able to do the same thing, which was just to kind of march through that final stage of the season. And there wasn't really ever a moment where I thought, Forge is in a bit of trouble here. But for me, I thought this year's team took another step and probably could have been, we saw last year them peak towards the end of the year. I think in a normal season this year, this team would have been pretty dominant all year long.
No better person to give the tiebreaker to, Bobby. What say you?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's two different scenarios, but when you look at 2020's team, to be honest, I think it had more depth. And that's hard to say looking back at 2019 because we're a very deep squad. But I just thought we had a little bit more depth around the park. Maybe a little bit more maturity in the fact, not that mature players, but we had players who weren't first-year pros. It was their second time around. Tactically, they were more in tune, right off the bat, and just knowing what it takes to win games. But both teams, for me, were exciting teams that played some very good football and, knew how to go out onto the field and get the results that they needed.
So aside from repeating as champion and job accomplished, that is obviously, especially in a tournament format, that is your single and only goal, is to go win and win, or your ultimate goal, not the only goal. But now that you've had some time to reflect on the tournament, it's been about 5 weeks now since we said goodbye to the Island Games. What have been some of your biggest takeaways, Bobby, in reflection on the bubble life and the competition itself?
Yeah, so there's a few things you take from that. The first thing is you look at yourself as a coach and your whole coaching staff and how we dealt with that whole situation. Because I think not only for us here at Forge, but with every coach and every coaching staff in the league, it was a unique experience. It's not something that we've been trained for. It's not something that you've been involved in the past. So you're really coming up with the best way of doing things, because you have to mix the football component, so the technical component, how immersed you keep guys involved in the game, but then you also have to have the social and the psychological component involved as well. And where do we detach? Where, as coaches, do we lighten up things, not just amongst the players in their own free time, but where do we do that with the team to make sure we've got everyone not only prepared physically, but we've got them prepared mentally. So I think that was one of the biggest things I take away from it personally. And obviously, when you go back, nobody's a magician. Nobody knew going into it exactly how to handle it. But you take away a lot of positives on how we handled it as a staff. Then I look at the team, and they were excellent. From number 1 to 22, they were fantastic each day. They were on time to every meal, dressed the right way, just being there, handling themselves properly to every session. Being there. After the first week, it was like, let this bubble last for another 6 weeks. It was crazy, towards the end on, the guys just thinking, because it's a unique thing that we're involved in, and maybe we're never going to do it again. And hopefully we're not going to do it again, not from a soccer aspect, but more from what's going on in the world around us. But it was a unique opportunity for all of them to be part of something special. And I think all of what could have been negative or could have been neutral was turned into something that was very positive amongst the group. And those are the kind of the biggest things that I take away from there. Then on the field, you're playing games every 3 days. You're playing games every 3 days, and they weren't stopping. The games weren't stopping. They just kept on coming. So challenging for us as coaches and the players. And I'll always say this, and it's the simplest thing to say, it's always easier when you're winning games.
Bobby, there was a lot of tight games. There was parity over the course of the tournament, a lot of even competition between the teams, which made it a really watchable and entertaining tournament. But what was the difference for you, in your opinion? What made your team come out as champions, in a tournament where, like I said, there's just a ton of parity across the board?
Yeah, I think a few things. One, it's, we're a team that knew each other. So tactically, we were set and we knew what we wanted to do. Call it a lot of players from the year before. That allowed us to have a very good off season and bring guys into the few guys that were coming into the squad. It was easy for them to adapt into the team. Second is the use of all of our players and the importance of all of our players. And I think that's important in this event because as we saw, there was a lot of injuries across all of the squads. One thing I'll always say is our second last game, I think it was against Cavalry. We're missing Cisse to injury. We're missing Nanko to injury. Obviously, Clyde Chella. We're missing Novak to injury and Jordan Dunstan. But I think nobody really realizes that because the depth of our squad that's on the field kind of makes up for it. I think, that's the second biggest thing that was in our advantage. And I just also think that the guys were tactically in tune with what we wanted. We knew as coaches how we wanted to get past that first group round and knowing that, 1 through 4 gets you into that next phase. And as quickly as you can do it, you want to get there. And then tactically, I think the guys were excellent in the 4 games after that.
This is obviously a unique interview in the sense that most coaches and most players from other teams that we've spoken to, they're in their off season. They're looking ahead to how do I stay fit? How do I stay ready for 2021? That's certainly not the case for Forge FC. Obviously, you guys are heading to El Salvador later this week. You have the Canadian Championship at some point in the future on the horizon. We'll touch on that a little bit later. And I find it interesting, Bobby, that you say, and for obvious reasons, you don't ever want to replicate a season where you are in a bubble, but if all goes well for Forge FC, you will be back in a bubble with international travel. So I'll get your take on that in just a second. I want to bring Ollie back in. And Ollie, can you give us the ground or the surface level scouting report on Limeño, who Forge will be playing? They were middle of the table, the Clausura in El Salvador before the league got canceled for COVID reasons. Plus, they also have a fantastic logo with the cartoon dancing pig. So aside from that surface level analysis, what can you tell us about their opponents?
Well, this one's a question for Bobby, probably more than me. But I watched their 2 league matches, or the highlights of their 2 league matches so far. And the one thing I'll say is it's a good thing that that's not where Forge are playing on Thursday, because the pitch of their home field was like, reminded me of my days in Oakville House League. It was not pretty. But I honestly don't know much about them. I think, like, I look at the overall draw for Forge going through to 3 rounds, and I don't think it's a bad draw. You stay away from the teams from Honduras and Costa Rica, which is big. So there's an opportunity there. But we all know how difficult it is to go away from home in CONCACAF, even against teams that maybe aren't the big giants of the region.
So now, Bobby, back to you. You've had a year or a previous experience in CONCACAF already under your belt. With all that being said, how has your scouting been? What have you been able to get on your opponents? And what are you looking forward to in terms of this next chapter of Forge and CONCACAF competition?
Yeah, the biggest thing with our opponent coming up is they're not a perennial powerhouse or a team that's well known in the region, like a couple of the guys that we played last year in Antigua and Olympia. But at the same time, they pose threats in their own way. They're a team that's very organized, very good defensively. They play a very tough game, and like Ollie said, it's great that we're not playing at their home field, because that makes a massive difference. Playing in the national stadium, because I think that lends itself more to our advantage of being able to play, to being able to be on the front foot. One thing we also have to remember is last year we were the team that was participating in this event for the first time ever. We're a team that was all of 3 or 4 months old. And I think maybe Antigua and Olympia walked into those games thinking, who are these guys? And, what are they going to do with us? So we have to be very wary of that going into this game, because I think these games, there's a banana peel sometimes on the field, and you got to make sure that you don't step on it. But we're confident in the group. We've had a good month of training now that we've been back. A very different month of training. You kind of feel like you are where you were before you left for PI. Not playing friendly matches, not having the best way of preparing. But the one thing we know is we've done this scenario before, and we came out champion for the TPL. So we're using that as our motivation to go into this. And like with everything, we wanted to repeat this year. In this event, we want to go one step further, but we know we have to take it one game at a time.
This is obviously a massive subject and one we don't get to dive into a lot, Wheel. So I'll turn the mic over to you for any questions you might have for the coach.
Well, it's just, how prepared can they be? You're playing on a turf field in Prince Edward Island. Now you're playing in the polar opposite come this week, 30-degree heat, humid, sticky field. The grass, even in the national stadium, isn't the best. It's a little bit of a slower game. Are you going to have to adapt, play a little bit of a different style, Bobby? And the other question is, have your players that were injured, any of them, have they recovered? How's the team's fitness heading into this tie?
Yeah, so first and foremost, on the tactical side with the elements, that's something you see when you get down there. We're obviously prepare for that. It's not a game where you can possibly go, 90 minutes at high octane. When you're playing in 90% humidity, that kind of changes things. So you have to find your right times when to press, when to block press, and close spaces, and put teams into traps from that end. And that's something we'll see once we see the pitch conditions down there. The great thing with our guys is we're easily adaptable in tactics. On where we're going to play, which phases of the field we're going to play in, how we're going to do things. And I think we showed that over our time in PEI. The second part of your question there with the injuries, we've had guys come back that are healthy, and we've had other guys who are banged up a little bit. And it's just the nature of how things go. The one thing is we know we've got the group that's able to get onto the field and get the business done, and the depth is there as well. Because we do have a situation in front of us where we don't want to think too far ahead, but we're down in El Salvador, and quickly after that, the next round comes up in Panama.
Would you go straight to Panama if you win, Bobby?
Yeah, so the plan is to go straight down to Panama, just with all the restrictions on getting back here, not being able to train, and the other tough thing is flights. There's not too many airplanes in the air these days to get you the flights that you want. So we may have been in a situation where we're back here for 4 or 5 days, not even able to fly out, and losing days in training. So the plan is, and we hope that that's the plan, that I won't be back here for the next couple of weeks.
Even on the One Soccer Hangout where there's no Canadian versus Canadian teams and a league that's used to one soccer watching. Coach Smyrniotis keeping his cards close to his chest on the lineup question. I love it. Sorry to cut you off, Ollie. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying back in the bubble then, basically, but this time in Central America, I guess.
Yes, so it'll be a little bit different.
Is that how it works? That your team's essentially on lockdown when you reach San Salvador? Is that the deal?
So once we get there, we'll arrive at our hotel and we have testing set up through CONCACAF. And then from there, we'll have our training session on the Wednesday evening. But other than that, we'll be in the nice confines of our hotel and getting prepared for things. You know, it's not something that we're going to be out and about. And I figure it'll be the same thing in the next stage. To be honest, I don't get too involved in what the plans are moving forward. I leave that to the higher ups here and our team manager to have everything in place. And we'll focus on our first task ahead on Thursday.
And keeping the task in mind on Thursday closely in mind, Bobby, but if we could, I'd just like to sort of take a step back and sort of ask you about the bigger picture and the future of Forge FC. Obviously, two big competitions coming up with this and the Canadian Championship. But in your estimation, and perhaps even your hope, do you imagine this could be the last time we really see the core or a lot of these players on Forge FC together to end the year? Because it would be safe to argue for a reasonable person that there's a lot of players on this team who are ready to take the next step in their careers, whatever that may be. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's interesting. Obviously, as the coach and technical director here, you want to see your team and your players stick around here for as long as possible. You know, I think guys have proven over the last couple of years what they're capable of. And if that next level comes, then that's where they should be going. That's the one thing we need to see. And I'm the biggest supporter of that. I've always been that, whether it was at Forge or my years before Forge and working in the development side of things, just making sure players can work up the ladder. So that's obviously something we want to see here. We also know that it's a difficult or it's a different time in world football. There's a lot of things changing. There's a lot of leagues around the world that maybe aren't playing soccer these days, and we're not talking about the top divisions in countries or the second divisions, but we're talking about third divisions and different things where there's a lot of players without clubs these days. So sometimes it may not come down to the level of the player, the talent of the players in our league, but some of those opportunities may just not be there in this next transfer window or so on. So it's something that's going to be interesting in general in the world market. You know, when we look at our team, we obviously had a plan for 2 years, 2 years of stability with the group. I think that worked out great, but we've also want to keep some of that stability going forward, and we are able to do that. But there will also be changes as you go forward, and I hope those changes are because players are playing and doing things at a higher level. I think that's just great for our organization, and it's just great for the league all around.
We're going to shift our focus a little bit to Major League Soccer in terms of Canadian Championship and just the state of some of the players you've coached in the past, Bobby, and how well they're doing. But before we get there, on a broad spectrum, we've had a few coaches now on these Hangouts. Tommy Olden Jr. said he doesn't believe that Major League Soccer clubs have paid enough attention to CPL players. Would you agree or disagree with that statement?
Yeah, I think it all depends. Maybe if you look at it and there's 28 teams in MLS and maybe I'm missing one or two or so on. But I think there are teams that are paying attention, at least through my radar and knowing things. Maybe not enough with the talent that's in this league. Just being somebody who's followed the North American game for many years and seeing players progress at that level and just seeing the different levels of players we have in this league. It's simple. There's players in our league that can make that transition to MLS. Now that comes down to a lot of factors. Positions, passports, because we do also have to remember that a lot of our Canadian players just simply can't play in the U.S. as a domestic player. They may not qualify for the domestic status that some Canadians qualify for, and that just poses a problem in itself. Then you look at, okay, is a team looking for a specific position to fill and different things. But I think just looking at my experience over 2019 and 20, and just some of the conversations that we've had here and with our sporting director here, Constantine, and just the different conversations he's had, I think they are paying attention. Maybe not if we look at it in the majority of the clubs. But the one comment that I have had is that it's a very good level. And to be honest, something they're paying attention to a lot more than USL.
Yeah. The strange bit for me is like I just don't see where much of the risk is for the MLS clubs. You know, I know the CPL teams aren't going to give these players away for free, but they're still salary wise, comparatively pretty cheap compared to European players or South American players. And like, I look at a guy like Joel Waterman, and it's basically a zero risk bet from Montreal. You may have something. If it doesn't work out, doesn't really matter. And he goes in and he's done well there. And I think he could be a player for them for a few years. So for me, I just don't see the downside for particularly the Canadian teams to maybe take a bit more of a chance.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing. It's there's not a lot of downside, but it starts becoming difficult when those Canadian teams don't necessarily need the position in a Canadian player.
Right.
And now that same player has to go into the US and get a foreign spot. And we've seen where the game has gone in MLS and where those foreign spots are going, a lot to South America, a lot of money being spent on players. I think if somehow you get to a point where the Canadians are playing domestically throughout North America and MLS, then those moves start becoming a lot easier.
Bobby, like we've seen some players, including, Borges, move abroad, move across the Atlantic. Does that seem like maybe even a better opportunity where there actually might be more interest in your young Canadian players?
Yeah, sometimes I think that, that's something that we had the discussion re Borges last year, and interest from MLS and just interest from different places overseas. And I just think there's probably a little bit more interest over there. And we've obviously had some success stories with Canadian players and Jonathan David, Alfonso Davies, Kyle Larin, a player that I know very well as well. And when these guys are playing in big competitions and big leagues, that opens people's appetite up. And remember, European clubs are, I don't want to say, you could say they're much more savvy, but they've been doing it a lot longer than most people in how they scout and how they network and when they feel they can find a market that's a little bit untapped. And we're seeing that now in Europe with the markets in the US and in Canada. There's been an absolute craze probably over the last 6 months with the Canadian market and just seeing the rise of these 2 20-year-olds and David and Davies, and where's the next one coming from? Well, all of a sudden now people are looking here and we've got a league. 4 years ago or 2 years ago, there's a player coming from here. They say, okay, what's the league in the country? And we didn't have one. We had 3 teams. So that fundamentally changes. And I think that's going to be a big thing for us. Maybe not immediately right now. That's going to be the big shift we're going to see from now over the next 5 years.
Right. And you mentioned USL. I mean, for me, the Canadian Premier League, whatever MLS, I have issues with MLS, the way that they kind of disrespect the Canadian player, how they don't qualify as domestic players in the United States. The fact that if Toronto FC goes on and wins, the Supporter Shield or whatever you want to call it this year, that they don't get a CONCACAF Champions League berth. Like, that's why the Canadian Premier League is so important. And that's why instead of players going to USL and kind of being in the shadow, whether they're Canadian, American, Central American, South American, Bobby, I just look at the Canadian Premier League as being a much more viable alternative to kind of give people that platform to show their potential to markets abroad. That just seems to be the more natural transition for me. And that's who you're competing with. When you're in conversations with players at the USL level, like the Canadian Premier League, now that it's 2 years in the book, has to be a much more viable opportunity, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I think when you look at it at the beginning, maybe you have players or Canadian players also playing in the USL, not knowing what this league's going to be about. But I think after 2019, it puts that all to bed. I think the league's done a great job of marketing the product. The clubs have done a great job. The product on the field has been very good. And I'll just leave it at a very simple footballing point. On Thursday, we're playing in a CONCACAF competition.
Yep.
I think as any player, you want to play continental football. Whether you're in Europe and Champions League, you're here, it's everything. And if you want to look at a fundamental difference between USL and Canadian Premier League, is we've got an opportunity to do that. Now you've got an opportunity to play on the highest stage with any of those clubs. And I think that's one of the biggest things we have as a league. And I think, our 2 years of existence, even though this year was a short one, I think have been very positive. Like you said, Gareth, before, I thought the football in PI was great.
Yep.
For how we prepared and how we did things, I thought it was entertaining. All teams across the board had something to bring to the table. And I thought it was an excellent exhibition for our game.
Bobby, you mentioned some of the players that you've had the chance to get to know very well through their development, and some of the young names on Team Canada's roster heading into a big year in 2021. One of the names that was missed, but very much belongs in that group, is Richie Larrivee, who has just been tearing it up at right back for TFC. I think all of you tweeted that if you tried that move to set up Piatti's game-winning goal, you would have broken your legs. And Gareth and I will decline to comment on that as your teammates on One Soccer FC.
He's got good feet. Ollie's got some good feet. So,
but just slow, very slow.
The pace is lacking on the FIFA ranking, that's for sure. What I'm trying to get to, though, is where would you put Richard Larrivee right now in terms of the Team Canada fold? How much do you think he can still improve Bobby, and do you see him as a viable starting right back?
Yeah, Richie Larrivee for me is one of the best Canadian players I've ever seen in my involvement in soccer, and it's not just about this year. I've known the young man since he was about 10. This is a guy who sat in Orlando for 3 years, and it's unfortunate. Because he could have been doing this 3 to 4 years ago. So I'm very happy in what he's doing and how he's progressing. Because as a football player and what he has in his legs technically, it's fantastic. You know, he grew up playing as a midfielder in different roles, and he's adjusted fantastically to the outside. And I think that gives us a massive boost as a national team and what we have both on the right and left side. And we can argue all we want about Alphonso Davies and where he's going to play. Gareth, I don't know where you are on this, but he's going to play left back. And if you have that in modern football, you can attack with the 5 all you want. And these guys will be able to defend. But Richie's been great, and I'm just happy to see that he's able to perform week in, week out, because it's something I believed in him from a very young age, and I knew he could be not just a good player in MLS, but an excellent player with a high ceiling that I think we'll see in some. Yeah, it's hard to say sometimes some bigger clubs, because I fancy Toronto FC as one of the biggest clubs in CONCACAF. You know, if you look at CONCACAF region, you know, for me they're a top 5 club from all ends of the spectrum. What they produce on the field, their ability to win and compete, and then just their infrastructure. But you look on the European stage, and Richie Larrivee has an ability to go there and play at a high level.
Bobby, let me ask you this. I want to pick your brain as a coach here. Of course, he can play right back, that transition. I mean, he's been playing the position for Toronto FC for 15, 16 months now. It's all happened relatively quickly, but we've seen him play at left back on the regular as well. Do you think he's capable of playing left back for Canada on the international stage? Because if you have Larrivee and Davies playing on the same side with Alphonso playing a little bit more of an advanced role, I mean, it can lead to some intriguing options and play someone else at right back. Is that a play that you consider?
Yeah, the biggest thing I look at is where do we get the best qualities of the players, and do we lose quality in a player when we move him around to start fitting things into the puzzle? And that's why when I look at Richie as an example, I think you get the best of Richie Larrivee on the right side. You can get the best of Alphonso Davies on the left side, and you know the difference is, you know, Alphonso may not have to defend as much that he has to on the European stage in some of these CONCACAF games. And now you've got 2 of the most dynamic players playing on the outside as your wingers in modern football, with a lot of people attacking with 5. You know, and you have those guys there, and they can cover the space going back and forth. You move Larrivee to the left, and he can do it, and he's shown with TFC he's done a good job. But I think you lose part of that ability for him to get around the corner on teams, and that he does very good on the right side. You know, on the left side, he's actually shown an ability to come inside. Maybe you have 2 guys kind of knocking heads on that side, but that's just my kind of 2 cents on the subject. You know, I love the ability of having backs that can move. You know, in our team, when we have a healthy Johnny Grant and Kwame Awua on the 2 sides, I think, you know, it's great to be able to have those guys, because then you're allowed to invert your wingers, get more guys in and around the box, maybe more scoring players as opposed to natural wingers. And now you're able to exert a lot of pressure on the opponent. And I think that's one thing that Canada will have to do, especially in this first stage of qualifying with some of the smaller nations, is really have to assert themselves offensively. And this maybe gives them a very good dynamic to do it. But then again, I'm not the coach, and the coach will make those decisions.
Well, I'm on board. I think you got 2 guys there, right, that can they can stretch teams. They can basically run an entire flank on their own, and then you can do different things inside with the forward players. So, yeah, I definitely like to see that. You got to balance it defensively, though.
Bobby, I know that both yourself and Toronto FC have competitions in front of them right now that they're worried about, but obviously the two of you will eventually meet in the Canadian Championship final. I'm not sure if you've heard anything at all, but I'm just wondering if you can give any life to my hope that we'll see Forge and TFC Christmas Day at Skydome with the snowy CN Tower in the background. Have you heard anything on an update on the Canadian Championship?
That'll be something. I've never pegged Christmas Day as being one of the days, but there's something to think of. To be honest, at this point, nothing. I think both teams are in competition right now. I think a lot of it maybe sits on the fact that TFC is going to go on a playoff portion of their season. So I don't know if this game is possible to be played in 2020. Just when you start doing the math and the days, but
right.
If the game is played in 2020, we'll be ready. We'll be as ready as can be. If not, we'll be ready at that point. So it's not something that's kind of on my radar because, as Ollie probably learned with me over 6 weeks, if it's in front of me, I'm focused on it. If it's not that big of a deal. We'll cross that path when it comes. But it's obviously a game that, as a team, you want to be able to play and you want to be able to compete for trophies. And of course, it's going to be a tough game, like I alluded to before. We're playing one of the top teams in CONCACAF.
No kidding. And you're watching them right now. They're top of the table. I mean, are you just saying, you know what? The longer they play, the better it is for us.
Yeah. Here's the one thing, it's one game, but no, they're playing some fantastic football. They're doing it in stretches. They're able to pull results sometimes when the game is not going their way. But for the most part, they've been excellent in the way they're doing things. And the gentleman we mentioned before is doing a pretty good job for them, Richie Larrivee, and being part of that. And obviously, when you have players like Pozuelo, who I think is just fantastic, a player I knew from his time at Genk, and just watching him play just through my connections with that club, it's been great to see this guy come in here and be a very special player in MLS.
Bobby, the Forge branding has been awesome, but like for people that don't live in the GTA, I mean, that Hamilton-Toronto rivalry, it's real, right? Like it exists away from the field, whether it's CFL football or what have you. There's a real rivalry there. I was born in Hamilton. I live in Toronto, right? So I'm kind of like somewhere in the middle, but how can you see this game being hyped up? Like if fans are allowed inside the stadium, I mean, it could just be bananas.
We'll have 25,000 at Tim Hortons Field. I think I think it's that important also to Canadian soccer. I think it's a great game for Canadian soccer and the growth of the game, and just something that's super just because of what you just talked about, Gareth. It's just transcends sport a little bit. It's two cities close to each other, and there's always been a little bit of a rivalry just between the cities themselves. So I think when you look at that, and I think it'll be fantastic. And that's the biggest thing, we're looking forward to, is that it'll allow the game to grow. And I think it allows our league to grow even further and much quicker than it is.
Finally, one last Major League Soccer note for the day. The biggest story in CONCACAF this weekend came when it was announced that the Supporters' Shield would not be handed out to the regular season champion of Major League Soccer this year. Greg Vanney said his players were pissed off about it. He was very frank, and for good reason. I know Wheels and Platt, I've heard your opinions on the matter, and I'll try and frame the question this way. If you were in Vanney's position, would you feel as pissed off as he says he was, to quote him, Bobby?
Yeah, I mean, if it's something that is there every year there's the Supporters' Shield being handed out, and to be honest, I had no clue that it was something that was actually part of the supporters. I thought it was an MLS trophy. So there's something I learned. But if it's something that's there, you expect it to be there. It's something, this is a tough time for athletes, for coaches, for everyone that's involved. And I don't think it's so much of a complaining as athletes on not getting a trophy, but it's more of, we're putting in this work. We've all sacrificed something different with Toronto FC being away from home for a period of time. They were in Florida, and now doing it again with their time in Hartford. I think it's just something that's a bonus for the players, and you just want things to be as normal as can be when you're on the pitch. So I can understand that frustration.
Ollie and Wheels, I'll get you to weigh in here quickly. And it's obviously noted that Vanney's not that often outspoken like that and that passionate about some of the questions in terms of outside the pitch with the media. So without going on a 5-minute soliloquy here, what's your read on the whole situation? I'll start with you, Wheels.
Well, whoever the Supporters' Shield Foundation is, these fools that made this decision just posted on Monday that they're currently holding meetings with supporter groups representatives. So you can see the backtracking already begun. Look, a decision like that is selfish. It's everything that's divided and hindered the growth of soccer in North America for years. People being territorial, making it about themselves rather than the collective. And that needs to stop. An egg is on all of their faces right now, and they should be absolutely ashamed of themselves, because being a supporter of any club, any team in the world, you're willing to sacrifice your afternoons, your evenings, you travel, your family understands where you are in terms of supporting your club team. It's the ultimate sacrifice to be a supporter. So putting contingencies when or when not you should be able to support by handing out the shield is absolutely, it's backwards. It's beyond foolish. It's asinine, and this sets back the game. And that's what I worry about, is that the supporters play a big role. I mean, playing in front of no one wants that. Football's not the same without people in the crowd, but these people are making it about themselves and not the collective. And that's my problem in this entire thing.
Yeah, I just think like the Shield isn't the trophy that everyone wants the most in MLS, right? That's MLS Cup, that's the championship. And so in a way, trying to win the Supporters Shield, it's like a commitment to your fans, right? That you want to be the team that has to excel week in, week out over the course of a long regular season in order to bring that trophy back to your supporters. And it does belong to the supporters. So to have that taken away, I think is a particular slap in the face to a TFC team that, you know, has gone on the road in Orlando and now in Hartford, gone away from their families, left home behind, and has kind of showed the commitment and the consistency and the professionalism needed to be top of the standings and to have a chance at winning this and bringing it back to Toronto. Just a little bit disrespectful for me, and that's why it was so disappointing.
The regular season in every league should matter more. And I'm sure that Bobby would support this as well. I mean, at a time where attention and eyeballs are being taken in every which direction, you want every game to count and you want every game to matter. And that's a small token to the players, the staff, everyone involved in putting on a season and achieving something special. It might not be the playoff style format, but there needs to be something there for fans and teams and everyone to gravitate to and focus on. And by taking it away, I just think you're doing a disservice to the game. And there's a trickle down effect, Bobby, because look, like in Major League Soccer, the winner of the league, the regular season, if it's an American team, they get a CONCACAF Champions League berth. But apparently, if you're a Canadian club, there's no room for you to automatically qualifying, meaning you need to do so by winning the Voyageurs Cup, meaning where if Toronto FC could have gone on and won the regular season this year, and they, in my opinion, they should get that Champions League berth, that would mean that Forge could have a chance not only to play in the CONCACAF League, but to play in the CONCACAF Champions League, which is the ultimate. So there's a trickle-down effect here that also affects your club as well, Bobby.
Yeah, of course. And it's something that you usually don't pay attention to till a situation like this happens. And right now you'll probably have CONCACAF, US Soccer, and CSA look at this. Last time it was Toronto FC winning MLS Cup, but they won the Supporters Shield at the same time. So nobody really paid attention to it because they obviously got into the competition with the MLS Cup. But I think this is areas that you have to revisit and look at. And I think all the involved parties will be doing that.
Bobby, obviously right now your focus, as it should be, is rightfully firmly on Forge FC and building this team, building this culture, building this identity. But before we let you go, we talked about players and perhaps a chance for them to move up one day in the world of soccer in terms of new challenges. Again, understating that this is, or overstating that this is not something that's a priority for you right now, but have you thought of that? And what are your aspirations throughout the rest of your career here?
Yeah, obviously, like you mentioned, it's not only players. You know, the uniqueness of this sport across the world is until we get to whoever you deem to be the largest club in the world, Real Madrid, Manchester City, there's always a level to move up. So I think the most important thing you do is you work hard at what you do. You try and build what you can and be successful, and the rest you leave to the soccer gods. But always you want to be able to challenge yourself as a coach and somebody who prides himself on building structures in soccer. And right now I'm able to do that here at Forge, and it's very fulfilling what we've been able to do, and we want to continue doing that. If something comes up along the way, we'll definitely look at that when it comes.
Bobby, we're extremely grateful for your time. We are excited to say that it's match week again for you guys. Yes. So I know how busy it must be. Best of luck. I'm sure you'll represent Hamilton in the Canadian Premier League very, very well, but enjoy getting back to the action. And thanks again for stopping by.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. Thank you very much, guys.
He is Bobby Smyrniotis, the head coach and technical director of Forge FC, heading to El Salvador. You can catch all the coverage around the match here on One Soccer. We look forward to getting back to meaningful football again. For Gareth Wheeler and Oliver Platt, I'm Adam Jenkins saying thank you for joining us. Make sure you subscribe and like the video before you click out, and we'll talk to you real soon from the One Soccer Hangout.